All right, what's going on, guys? It is St. Patrick's Day, Thursday. Let's go. Um, so this is my first time trying this out with a video, so we'll see how it goes. Right now, I'll be honest, it's suction cupped to my windshield here because, as we know, I am driving, and I'm kind of hoping that it doesn't like release from the window and then fall because long story short, just got back from vacation in Florida for a short bit, and immediately upon arriving in Florida, and just of course this is the way it goes down. My phone just stopped working, and so I'd been like cut off from everything, and um, not that I needed much, but you know now I have a new phone, so if it falls off of this little suction cup thingy, that's gonna be really disappointing. But here we go. We're trying it out. This is the proof. It's not just car sounds. It is in fact car. Um, yeah, so I was on vacation for a little bit, doing that whole thing, and we're at a wedding, and that was fun. And Mav was on the airplane, my son, and that was chaos, and exactly what you feel like it probably is. And on the way back, not so bad, but I'm glad to be back. I found a gym while I was out there, and it was an interesting experience, just because working out on vacation, away from home, so close to a meet. I actually have my next powerlifting meet this Sunday, or Saturday rather. And so right now I'm doing a little water cut. I'm trying to get down to 165, which isn't too far away because I'm so small. um, and so I had to lift, and they were my heaviest lifting sessions for my entire prep were while I was away on vacation. So I'm in this different gym, trying to figure out what the rules are, and fit in and not cause a scene or anything like that. There's also the risk of embarrassing yourself, trying to hit weights that are possibly a little bit too high. I ended up getting sick while I was out there. I spiked like a 103, 104 fever for like 24 hours. I didn't have the fever for 24 hours. I was sick for 24 hours, but at one point I had like a really absurd fever. And for whatever reason, I was like, no hospital. I'll just suffer here because that's what dudes do, I guess. And I ended up being fine, about 24 to 30 hours later. So that was good. But during the lifts, it was interesting because I'm in this new gym. I don't know what kind of bars they have and what weights they're using. And for a while, I couldn't find any clips. I had these I don't know if you're familiar, but these the old school metal clips that you squeeze, and they were sliding off the bar immediately, and they were all metal plates, so they were sliding all over the place. And it was we were playing a risky game for a while, but it was good. I feel good going into prep, and going into the competition rather. And yeah, I'm feeling ready. Got my water and everything good to go, and we're hitting it hard. I got to weigh in at 7 o'clock on Saturday up in Massachusetts. The reason why this one matters is if I make weight and do well enough, I will qualify for Raw Nationals for the Open division in Las Vegas in June. So that would be super cool, considering I've only been powerlifting for like a year and a half or something like that. This will be my fourth meet total so far, and so I'm really happy about that, and that's pretty cool. So that's kind of my updates for right now. Otherwise, I put up a post the other day talking about back pain and how hips are often a big factor with back pain. And a guy I wrestled with in high school, a friend of mine, Ramzan, he said he'd love to hear more about like just fitness in general on the podcast. So I figure, why not? Fuck it. Let's dig more into back pain in the hips in general, and kind of just do the best we can to talk through it. I always seem to do better with like the visual components associated to fitness and kind of explaining certain things, but I'll do my best. I'll give it a shot. So what I put up in the Instagram post was about how so many people when they have or experience back pain, they immediately think about, oh, they must have a back injury. And keep in mind, one, I'm not a doctor or anything like that. I'm a personal trainer, but I've been training for a very long time, and I specialize in injuries, joint replacements, corrective exercise, really biomechanics and anatomy. So specifically, how do people move most appropriately? And when they aren't doing that or they're experiencing pain, what are the common issues, or how do you figure out what the issues are? That's really my field of expertise, if you will. So put up this post about how people who often experience back pain immediately just assume that they have a back injury, and they just travel down that path. And if they don't actually have a back injury, or even if sometimes they do, they end up with poor results over long periods of time. And what I mean is they don't ever actually get any better. And there's a number of reasons that happens, but one of the big ones is hip weakness. When the hips are weak or unstable, or when the hips are a factor, they often refer into the lumbar. You've got this thing called your sacroiliac, and it's got a bunch of nerves that kind of sit in that pocket, and the majority of your posterior chain and like your hip joint, most of the where you experience nerve pain is in that pocket, or it at least stems from that pocket, if you will. And what ends up happening is, if your hips are weak or unstable, or you have an impingement, or any number of these things, it'll refer into your low back. So one of the things I said is, if people just strengthen their hips, their glutes, and went for regular walks, then they would stave off a lot of these issues and probably just get a lot better in terms of the overall pain itself. So before we go into anything deeper, first things first, if you've got back pain, you should consult with your physician and just get cleared to do any sort of exercise or any sort of program at all. You should go through the motions that are necessary in order to just be sure that you're safe and doing the right thing. Again, I'm not a doctor. I work with physicians, but I am not one myself. So just to keep that in mind, if you will. So that being said, go through your steps, make sure that you do the right thing. But the first thing that, outside of those, that I would recommend is, if you've got back pain, is to look into what does your day-to-day look like. If you sit a lot, or even, it's not even just sitting, I don't want to vilify sitting, but if you maintain a stagnant posture for any given amount of time, if you stand for a long period of time all the time, if you sit for a long period of time, if you lay on your back for a long period of time, I don't know, it doesn't matter. diversity of movement and positioning is really important. And so if you find yourself, especially in like the workplace today, a lot of people work from home or work in an office, and as a result they sit and they don't do a lot of movement. What ends up happening is you basically create compensations that are consistent with that posture. So you end up with shortened hamstrings and glutes. You end up with overly tightened hip flexors. You end up with like rounded forward shoulders, rounded upper back. All these consistent positions that people seem to be pretty aware of that are associated with sitting, right? Sitting too long. So a lot of those things happen. You end up overly elongating in your upper back and in some parts your lumbar, overly shortening or contracting in your hip flexors, in your hamstrings, and your glutes. All right. Now, the reason why that's not the best is because when you go to start moving again, you're going to go to try to lengthen those things that have been contracted or shortened for a long period of time. And what can happen is that's where tension injuries happen. And a tension injury is basically saying like, okay, you're going to take something like a rubber band that's been sitting for a long period of time, and you're going to rapidly like pull against it. So you're going to drive force into it really, really quickly. And the tension injury happens when you have something that is fixed. So say that band is attached to like your door, like a doorknob or like a squat rack, and it's kind of stuck there for a while. So maybe it's a little dry, it's a little brittle, and then you rapidly pull against it, and then it creates a small tear or lesion or whatever the case is. And so that happens typically because like you weren't prepared for the rapid change in that movement. And so that's where movement diversity is really, really important. So outside of speaking with your physician and just going through the paces the way that you're supposed to, I would really recommend getting a good movement screening and like general fitness analysis. Because if you see the right person, whether it be a physical therapist or it be a really good strength coach / personal trainer, whatever they want to call themselves, they'll do an analysis on your movement. They'll check your gait pattern, they'll check your squat pattern, your hinge patterns, they'll check your like all the primary core, I hate to call it movements, but your core stuff, anti-flexion, anti-extension, etc. And they'll see where you might have restriction or a mobility issue and go from there. Now, the big thing is going to be that the entire body, regardless of where you experience pain, it's all connected. So we try not to focus too aggressively on one particular area as if it is the sole problem or the sole weakness, because it's all a part of what's called a kinetic chain. It's how your body links together and ends up creating movement, I guess. Creating might be the wrong word, but creating movement. And so everything links together. The best way I could explain it is to do a squat, you have to have strong feet, mobile ankles, you have to have, fluid knees, strong and mobile hips. Like, they all have to work together. And if they don't, you end up with a compensation. And that compensation is what ultimately will lead to like larger than acceptable asymmetries, but then also it will eventually, in my personal opinion, lead to an injury. So when it comes to the issue of low back pain, And what my post was about, I very loosely just kind of proclaimed, if you had stronger hips and glutes and took regular walks, then you would likely not have back pain. And even though I was kind of just being short with it and just kind of just like stating just like very flatly what to do, you know, that may come across as like, well, like, what does that even mean? Like, I get it, yeah, that it was short and didn't explain a lot, but it doesn't make it less true. So the let's just stick with the concept of just like sitting as like the primary provocateur, if you will. So if you're sitting a tremendous amount and you're setting up your home office in a way, or your I guess your desk in a way where you don't have to go anywhere in order to be the most productive, like everything is right there for you, you end up limiting all the other patterns of movement that you might otherwise experience if you had to go up and down stairs, you know, if you had to twist and turn and move things, all these other things, you know, you end up limiting your movement diversity. So if you just went for a walk, walking is pretty complex, even though we take it for granted. You know, it's flexion, extension, you get everything involved. There's rotation, there's a tremendous amount of stuff that has to happen for you to walk well. And just by doing that regularly, you would maintain some level of diversity in your movement that, as long as you weren't too far gone, it would make a huge benefit on your low back. Now, if it was to a point where you had like heavy compensations and the pain was increasing, but it was a result of weakness and compensation, well, then the likely culprits are going to be your inability to extend your hips, very likely. So having strong glutes, having strong hips, having strong hamstrings are all really important for maintaining the overall integrity of your low back, because when you don't, you got to think about every step that you take is taken under the experience of whatever compensation you've developed. And so everything's going to be, you know, a micro trauma. You know, you pair that with, you know, stagnant movement, and then there you go. You end up with a tension injury as a result of overexposure to positions as well as weakness. And so when I see stuff like that, I think it's kind of sad, because it is really, really avoidable. Mostly if you just did a generic strength training program with either on your own and you had good programming, or with a professional that understood these concepts, it's very, very avoidable. Unfortunately, people are incredibly reactive to things like this rather than proactive, because they always think like, oh yeah, no, I'm fine now, so I don't really have to worry about it. And I get that, you know, the call to action and the importance of something once it's relevant, such as pain, you know, it's a harder call to action there. But if you simply would, you know, even work out, in some cases 2 days a week, half hour, you know, it's going to be so much better, exponentially better for you than if you maintain that stagnant positioning all the time. And then, you know, really just don't be surprised if you experience back pain over time. You know, especially as we age, we get to a point where sustaining our muscle mass becomes really difficult for our body, especially as there isn't a call to action, as we don't use it. So my biggest recommendation would be, if you are a person whom is identifying with like, you know, staying in the same position consistently, a lot of people would say like flexibility, passive stretching, and things like that. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, because you're not really recovering from anything. I would recommend something closer to like mobility training, where you practiced controlled movement. There's like a thing called controlled articular rotations, which is really helpful, and it's basically like flexibility that you can control rather than something that's passive, through different rotations at major joints. Things like that are really, really helpful. I can put that in the show notes. I can link some cars and some things to do to strengthen the hips and glutes and hamstrings, if you do have that. And I'll throw a couple of good passive stretches in there just to kind of get you going in between. But the trick is to either not lose or to regain the necessary level of mobility. And what I mean by that is, like, what's the amount of mobility you need to either, one, not be in pain, or two, do the things that you want to do. And that's how you know how much mobility is appropriate. So again, sticking with that example of sitting all the time, just because it's easiest, and I think most people will understand that best. Sticking with that, if you're a person that sits all the time and you're shortening your glutes and hamstrings, it might benefit you to do some light stretching on them in between sets of exercise, just so that way you maintain a position of like enough length, if you will. But it's not something that you want to simply just stretch and then overdo that. You're going to want to do things like hip bridges, squats, planks, things like that. Things that are basically opposites of what you're doing currently. And really, where this all comes from, just to give you kind of like a light background, and then we'll hop off of this, is so the low back has, like, it's a really sensitive area from the hips to the low back because they're really close together, obviously. And what ends up happening is you have a lot of muscles that tie into or directly support the low back, on top of there also being like a major like housing of nerves. And so when you think about all of the things that kind of connect into or support it, there's a lot that can go wrong. And when you ignore those things, you just increase the risk of like the symptoms incurred from those compensations. So in this case, we're talking about back pain. The things that a person can do to avoid or kind of eliminate back pain that is a result of compensation or weakness are really, really simple. It's kind of like your Jane Fonda style stuff. You got your hip bridges, you got your side leg raises. You can do some like knee tucks for the hip flexors. There are things like cobras. There's so many things that you can do to get out of or actively prevent those things. But knowing that regardless of what your goal, whether it be weight loss, whether it be injury prevention, whether it be performance, whether it be sport, whatever, strength training is always going to be your best bet. It's going to be the most effective style of exercise that you can do. You can go hit the elliptical and say that like you're all about calorie burning and all that, but it's a singular benefit, and it's really difficult to keep up with simply just burning calories for exercise. Also, the movements tend to be incredibly repetitive, which, as we've discussed, is not always to your benefit. Some movement diversity is important. But using something like an elliptical, not that it's like there's no place for it, but to get that kind of cardio, quote unquote, style conditioning, you can do that in many, many other ways that are way better for you in a diverse amount of ways. You can get it through just HIIT, like circuit training. You can do a whole bunch of stuff. Those are all just buzzwords. They don't necessarily mean anything. But tell me you're opinionated without telling me you're opinionated. But what I was getting at is there's a bunch of other ways that you can get that level of conditioning and kind of like that metabolic effect from like doing cardio. And it doesn't have to be long and drawn out. It could be short bursts of intense, diverse exercise, and it'll be way better for you. It'll actually benefit your strength training, and so on and so forth. But again, here I go ranting. The point I'm getting at is there is no reason that for you to not be strength training, regardless of what your goals are. If you're, an Ironman athlete, you should be strength training. If you're a basketball player, you should be strength training. Now, the things that one might do with each diverse athlete could be different from one person to the other, from one sport to the other. And as a matter of fact, it will be different if it's done properly. But it will still be strength training at its base. And it goes the same for just like the everyday person. In order to maintain the quality of life that you currently have as you age, you need to maintain and increase muscle mass and neural drive, so overall strength. You need to do that because it will degrade over time. And that's really what it means when people are like, oh, I guess I'm just getting older. Like, yes, you are aging, but getting older doesn't have to mean just accepting pain and all the problems that come with it, with like quote unquote aging. There are solutions and they're simple. Either you just aren't aware of them, you're too lazy, and as a result just like to complain about things, sorry, not sorry, or you're just doing it improperly. My recommendation is always going to be start with that movement screening and fitness analysis. And if you're struggling, you need to work with someone. You should make that time, even if you do work with somebody that's like a hybrid style where they write workouts for you and you work out with them maybe once a week, or you check in with them once a month or whatever. Some version of that is going to be really, really beneficial for you. And it just needs to happen. So when it comes to like these little like nonsense, like shitty issues that people incur, and in this particular case, sticking with back pain, a lot of the time it has nothing to do with your back. It just has to do with you being weak or deconditioned, or like having stagnated movement, or just not moving well in general. And there are solutions for that. I will say, and some people won't like this, that sorry, I'm getting a phone call. All right. So I will say that when people have back pain, a lot of the time they freak out and they immediately react. And I get it, because like pain sucks. Nobody wants to be in pain. But if you go see a surgeon immediately and you decide for yourself that you have back pain and therefore you need to see a back surgeon, well, I'm not saying not to do that. Information collecting is a part of the educated decision-making process. But, if you're a hammer, a lot of things are nails. So if you go see a surgeon, or a back pain surgeon, and you tell them that you have back pain and that you don't want back pain anymore, don't be surprised when they want to do surgery. So that's all I'm saying. Just collect enough information across all professionals, do your diligence, take the proper steps, including getting a movement analysis, doing all of the things, right? Seeing a physical therapist, maybe seeing a qualified movement specialist, seeing your general practitioner, seeing the appropriate specialists, doing those things to collect enough information to make the best decision for yourself. Because I'm just making up a scenario in my mind right now, right? I don't know you personally, but I have been in this field for 16 or so years, and I have seen my fair share of people who have gotten surgery and didn't need it, and have gotten surgery and did need it. And I've also seen a lot of people get better from just taking walks and doing squats, making sure that they had the appropriate mobility and control over their own bodies, and get really good from that. I've seen a lot of that. So that's all I'm saying is do your diligence. Don't jump to conclusions, and really think about what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you can most effectively find yourself in a position to either fix your issues or prevent them entirely. That's the key. Preventing them entirely is absolutely the key. All right, so this is my first attempt at video, and hey, it didn't fall down. That's awesome. I'm going to sign off for now, and I'll upload this a little bit later. But for now, thanks for hanging in with me. Again, this is the Marsette perspective, and sometimes we talk about fitness and stuff. Make sure you share this video and recording with people if you found it to be helpful or valuable. I'll be sure to put some things to do for things we discussed today into the show notes, so that way there's some resources for everybody. But other than that, see you next time. Bye.